Zoho CRM, the mighty CRM that has a special place in my heart. Now, after finishing this script, I realized that my review ended up a bit intense. Take my word with a grain of salt and try to build your own opinion. I may have a bit of professional deformation and may exaggerate some areas, or maybe not. I don't know. You are the judge. Anyway, reviewing Zoho CRM isn't simple. It's a part of a massive ecosystem, more than 50 interconnected products. Here, I'm trying to isolate the CRM itself to show how it performs on its own. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or manager choosing a CRM, this video will cut through the sales language and help you form a grounded understanding. Also, before we jump into the review, you'll notice that I'm comparing Zoho to Salesforce all the time. But I'm doing it only because Zoho is openly positioning itself against it, mirroring its features and messaging. That's the context in which I'll evaluate them. The conclusions are yours. This is a long and detailed analysis, and for your convenience, chapters are listed below. We'll look at Zoho's origins, user interface, documentation and support, security posture, cost of ownership, and whether I trust it for my own business. Welcome to my channel. I'm Jeff Tiley, and I help small and mid-sized businesses build stronger client relationships through digital tools and business practices. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, otherwise you may not see me ever again. Let's jump to the story. Let's talk about the company behind Zoho. This is a very important part of this review. To truly understand some of the areas of the Zoho as a product, you probably have to understand how they are built. And Zoho is a very unusual tech company. Zoho Corporation started back in 1996, though it wasn't called Zoho back then. The original name was AdventNet, and the company was founded by Srihar Vembu and Tony Thomas. I really hope I pronounced his name properly. Their global headquarters sit in Chennai, India, but they also have a major US base in Austin, Texas. Fun fact, Zoho is completely bootstrapped, which means no venture capital and no private equity, and no outside investors telling them what to build or how fast to grow. Every dollar that funds their business comes from customers paying for their products. That's incredibly rare in SaaS world, especially for a company this size. Also, it's hard to talk about Zoho CRM without the context of more than 50 different other products. They've built business tools covering CRM, email, analytics, HR, finance, marketing, even operations management. Everything lives under one, as they promise, integrated umbrella. They're essentially building a parallel universe to Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, and Salesforce Cloud, except it all connects natively out of the box, in theory. What I love about Zoho's approach is their take on culture. Their CEO has unusual philosophy for a tech founder. Instead of chasing Silicon Valley growth or setting up offices in major cities, he built development centers in rural India. He hires from local schools, trains talent directly, and deliberately decentralizes his workforce. His goal to prove that world-class technology can come from anywhere. Despite operating globally, Zoho has kept a strong sense of identity. They position themselves as ethical alternative to big players, data privacy first, fully self-sufficient, and apologetically independent. You won't find them mining user data or relying on third-party clouds. They own and run their own infrastructure. Technically, that independence traces back to their engineering roots. Before becoming a SaaS company, AdventNet built network management tools, the kind used by telecoms and enterprise IT departments. That background gave Zoho a technical foundation long before most competitors even existed. And perhaps most importantly, Zoho takes a long-term view. They're not chasing quarterly numbers or IPO valuations. Their leaders openly says that their real capital isn't money, it's culture, skill, and dedication. In an industry obsessed with growth at any cost, Zoho's quietly building a business meant to last decades. That's what makes them unique. A private, profitable, globally scaled SaaS company run from rural India by people with strong philosophy and ethos. Which brings us to a very important question. For whom is Zoho CRM? Understanding who Zoho CRM is really for is more complicated than it looks. On their website, Zoho pushes one core product above all else. Zoho One, a bundled subscription that includes all 50 plus Zoho apps in their higher tier editions. To grasp Zoho CRM's positioning, you just can't ignore this ecosystem. Now, if you're watching this, you're probably looking to implement a CRM or switch to a different CRM system. Wouldn't that be nice if there were a tool that would ask you a couple of questions about your business and would give you a recommendation? Well, I've got some good news for you. I've built one. Answer a couple of questions and we'll make a recommendation which system works best for your business. Link in the description below. Now back to the story. Years ago, a large construction company approached us wanting to deploy a Zoho CRM across multiple regions. The documentation claimed the support for regional divisions, so we proceeded. Mid-implementation, we hit a hard limit. The system couldn't assign separate company details or tax IDs to each division, breaking the integration with Zoho Invoice and other tools. On paper, the feature existed. In practice, it didn't scale. More recently, a 12-person Dutch company already using Zoho Inventory approached us to expand into Zoho CRM and integrate their operations more tightly. They needed a simple automation for handling back orders, one consolidated purchase order that summarized all missing items across customer orders. Instead, Zoho generated a separate report for every single backordered line. Even Zoho Analytics couldn't access the necessary data to create the summary. The system proved far too rigid for what should have been a straightforward process. After years of this, my conclusion is blunt. Zoho works best for companies that already operate the way Zoho was designed to function. If your process matched its built-in logic, say 90 to 95%, you'll be fine. If not, every deviation demands custom workarounds or process compromises. We will get in more details to this later. I know, I didn't make your life any easier, so let me give you at least an idea for whom Zoho CRM can work. For most B2B companies, it should be fine. For some B2C companies that don't rely heavily on e-commerce, also should work really nicely. Now, most importantly, for whom it probably won't work. For anyone who has extensive marketing operations, for anyone who needs a lot of automations and customization, for anyone running subscription business or SaaS, and for companies with a lot of transactions like processing companies, for example. Which brings me to Zoho CRM's user interface. Now, Zoho CRM user interface is built around what they call modules. In the world of other systems, we call these objects or entities, but Zoho uses the term modules. Okay, so what is a module? A module is a collection of records of a special type. For example, leads. If you have a web form on your site, all those submissions flow into the leads module. The same logic applies to contacts, accounts, deals, and so on. The standard base Zoho CRM package comes with a substantial number of these modules, which initially suggests you can do a lot, but I'll get back to that. Let's focus on the user interface organization itself. Now, to better understand where Zoho stands and how it compares to other systems, I had to spend a lot of time and thinking about how to organize this. And I can broadly split user interfaces into two non-scientific categories. And the first is the use case-based UIs. These are interfaces specifically designed by experts and targeted at a single intuitive task. Think of a sales pipeline view focused purely on moving a deal forward. Now, the second big cluster, which I call a modular user interfaces, is where Zoho lives. A modular UI means everything is organized around this modules. A module like accounts acts as a container. When you open an account record, you see a cascading list of related records tied to it. This could be contacts, tasks, emails, orders, support cases, anything. Crucially, you can create custom modules to structure your unique business processes. The primary problem with these modular interfaces is that they are complex. Now, this is not only Zoho's problem or anyhow related to Zoho, it's just how this type of systems are designed. They are incredibly difficult to explain and are not intuitive for the average user. They represent a mathematically strict, logical database structure, but they require significant mental overhead. For instance, to create a new order, you don't just fill out a simple form. An order involves the main order record, the form, but also order line items. There are attached records representing to the quantity and price of each product. That product itself is another related record linked to your product catalog. So in short, you are navigating a massive web of connections that live on different screens. It is logical and it allows for complex systems, but it's utterly counterintuitive for the user. As a result, almost all records in the Zoho interface look practically identical. Aside from a few custom-styled elements like the pop-up window for composing an email, everything is structured like a large database with a collection of forms. Now, in my experience, this is unfriendly to the user. For the business, it's actually nice because you have the possibility of creating a virtually limitless number of combinations. It's like a massive Lego, but for the user, it's confusing and clunky. There is no simple answer as to whether this is good or bad. It's simply the nature of the design. As I said, the same structural complexity is shared by heavy-duty enterprise products like Salesforce, Microsoft, Dynamics 365, Oracle Siebel, and SAP CRM, and many others. All these huge, expensive corporate systems are built on this block-based modular principle. And Zoho is built the exact same way. This leads to a logical conclusion. Zoho should therefore be categorized with these enterprise systems. Unfortunately, no. And I will explain you why later. Zoho inherits all the complexities associated with this block-based interface organization, but it fails to provide the flexibility and power that these larger, more sophisticated systems offer. We will return to this point later, but that is the critical takeaway about the UI. There is really not much more to say about it because wherever you go, everything looks almost the same. In deals, for example, you can switch to a Kanban view, but don't be fooled into thinking that Kanban is some special dedicated visualization. You could organize almost any other module in Kanban. It's simply a reorganization of your database records into columns, where the column name is simply one value from a pick list, or in other words, a drop-down. Just in this case, it's the deal stage. Now, what I did like about Zoho were some of the built-in features, like sales forecasting. Typically, these features are found in more expensive systems. Sales forecasts are universally built on 3 core parameters: deal amount, probability of closing, and the expected close date. Zoho is no different here. Most CRMs work this way. Zoho's forecasting interface is actually pretty cool. The single thing I disliked was incredibly low number of customization options. Zoho has decided a specific way that forecasts can be built, either by deal amount or an adjusted deal amount, and that's it. All settings revolve around planning against a sales quota. In other systems, you have more flexibility, but here, given the lower price, you simply have to accept that limitation. For instance, you cannot forecast by product group, which is a frequent request from clients in distribution or B2B trade. They want a forecast report of how many units of a certain brand are in the pipeline or have been quoted. Zoho does not allow this in its dedicated forecasting module, so it only forecasts sums of money. For any reasonably sized business, focusing solely on amounts make the forecast tool pretty useless, forcing you to build custom reports and analytics, which have their own limitations, as we will discuss later in this review. I also like that Zoho includes built-in tracking for campaigns. This is convenient, but again, it's semi-manual. It's not an automated campaign system, such as for email blast, for example. For that, you have to use a separate product called Zoho Campaigns, which is a great time to talk about how easy, or more accurately, how difficult it is to implement Zoho CRM. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is the sheer volume of settings. When you open Zoho CRM settings panel, you don't see 3 or 5 sections. You see 9 separate sections dedicated to configuration. This immediately tells you something. To set up Zoho CRM effectively, you need to be deeply familiar with the system's architecture. I have first-hand experience here. We worked on 3 major Zoho CRM implementation projects, 2 of which ultimately failed. I won't detail all the reasons now, but a core factor was that despite the apparent complexity and winning flexibility of Zoho settings, nearly every individual configuration is, and I'm sorry to make this judgment, poorly engineered. To illustrate, I have to draw a comparison. Again, I'm not selling Salesforce, I'm just using it as a very good reference. Salesforce got an automation tool called Flow. Salesforce Flow is a visual programming builder. Very simply put, it's built on a limited set of fundamental operators like get record, save record, update record, loop, and so on. If you're familiar with physics, think of a standard model. The universe is built from a small fundamental set of particles. These particles combine in infinitely complex ways to form all the matter. Salesforce Flow is built on these foundational components, which are designed so elegantly that you can build business logic of virtually unlimited complexity using visual programming. Now, why this is important? Because you don't need expensive developers. An administrator or skilled in-house user can visually assemble logic to cover about 99% of a medium-sized business's use cases. Now, let's talk about Zoho's equivalent actions. The components that make up Zoho's Flow are badly designed. They are built around pre-written scenario-specific logic created by Zoho's developers. If you step outside the boundaries of that scenario, you simply cannot configure it. It is incredibly difficult to explain until you actually start working with it. Salesforce components are fewer, but they are more fundamental and versatile. Zoho's components, on the other hand, are use case based. So they thought of a use case and they built a component for that specific use case. To accomplish anything outside those narrow use cases, you are essentially forced to program it yourself. Now, furthermore, Zoho often restricts access to system records. A prime example is inventory module I mentioned earlier. Zoho Inventory has a critical system module called packages. I cannot access that packages element directly from the Visual Flow Builder. I have to write custom code using the API to get indirect access to what should be a standard component. This means you will not be able to build just any process using the visual tool. You might build some, but not all. And this is a nightmare for planning. You never know when you will hit a wall where the developer simply didn't think or plan for a specific operation, making it impossible. Even with my expert platform knowledge, the system lacks a good, centralized logic for development. This makes implementation planning difficult, and some automations must be either abandoned or written with complex code. And the real problem is not writing the code, but maintaining it. 2 years later, even your own programmer will struggle to remember the dependencies. Zoho lacks proper dependency checking mechanism, which exists in Salesforce to audit what will be affected if you change a piece of business logic. It feels like the attempt to build tools for admins and integrators is there, but it's incomplete, underthought, and, unfortunately, I have to say that again, poorly designed. Now, before we continue, just a reminder that I've built a tool to help you choose the right CRM system for your business, answer a few quick questions, and will recommend a product that suits you best. Link in the description below. Now, let's look at the implementation from the user end. How hard it is to train users and manage permissions. Now, Zoho permission system is also peculiar. While it's structured similarly to Salesforce's, it operates differently. Salesforce allows you to grant granular access to a function set using a permission set. Zoho does not work that way. If you want to share a specific piece of functionality with just 1 or 2 users, you are forced to create an entirely new profile. If you have any experience with system administration, you know this is overly complicated and inconvenient, to say the least. You will inevitably end up with a huge number of profiles that are extremely difficult to manage. If you need to audit and remove access to a specific function after a couple of years of use, you will have to manually audit every single profile to find out where to disable it. From the end user perspective, all the complexity associated with large corporate systems applies to Zoho. It is not intuitive for the user. You will need to invest in training, create so-called champions, in-house experts who understand the system's intricacies, and explain abstract concepts like related records. You get all the user adoption challenges of a complex, expensive enterprise system, but you don't get the comprehensive administration tools to manage that complexity. Now, my view here is very negative. It feels like the system was fundamentally unfinished. The developers didn't fully think through its universality. They hard-coded scenarios but failed to give administrators the proper tools to explore or expand them. I assess Zoho's implementation difficulty at 5 out of 5. Salesforce is also 5 out of 5 difficulty, but for good reason. It's flexible. A tool like Pipedrive, by comparison, is maybe 1 or 2 on that same scale because it's intuitive and simple. But Pipedrive offers very limited customizations on the other hand. With Zoho, you get a highly complex user interface and a high difficulty of adoption, coupled with highly questionable customization capabilities. They appear to be there on paper, but when you work on real projects, you realize how illogically and confusingly they are implemented. For businesses that require any sort of customization, and you will because you cannot use Zoho out of the box, you will need to heavily rework the system. I sincerely pity anyone trying to implement Zoho CRM in a business that requires even a small amount of tailoring. Expect user resistance, low data entry compliance, and all the problems faced by large corporations who must create entire departments just to implement these systems. I know what I'm talking about. I'm currently working on a project where my role is focused solely on user adoption, creating training materials, supporting champions, and tracking metrics. On that project, we use Salesforce, which at least offers the flexibility to justify the effort. Zoho demands the same effort without the flexible tools. Now you have to decide if that trade-off is worth for you. Again, I am biased because I have years of experience with the system, but I can certainly say the implementation difficulty is high. You should expect it to be a very difficult process, which brings me to the next point of my video. And it's time to talk about the features of the CRM. As I was writing this review, I struggled with the usual approach of simply listing interesting capabilities one by one. Instead, I'll frame it this way. Theoretically, with a massive amount of effort, you can use Zoho as a full-fledged system. It can be your central repository for all your data, and yes, you can technically build complex processes on it. We once had a case where we built a sophisticated technical project for a Polish fintech startup tracking user onboarding within their mobile app, a highly automated process. It was an absolute nightmare to implement technically, mainly because the API documentation didn't match the API's actual behavior, but we made it work. Now, the truth is, Zoho has a lot of features, far more than you need. The most critical point about Zoho's capabilities is their product ecosystem. They offer separate products that integrate. For example, you need invoicing. You subscribe to Zoho One, which I'll cover in the pricing section of this video, and that includes their financial suite, Zoho Finance. Within that is the invoices module. You set it up the way you need, and I can say that invoicing works pretty fine. My company uses Zoho invoicing ourselves. It performs its function without any issues. We're even looking at Zoho Expense, though it has a few limitations that concerns us. Now, the core idea behind Zoho's feature set is this. You need a function, you connect a module, and it integrates into CRM. You need invoicing, connect Zoho Finance, and all your invoices appear on the account record in the CRM. You need inventory or warehouse management, connect Zoho Inventory, and all your products and stock items are available. But again, a lot of issues with Zoho revolve around poor engineering. Let me give you an example. When you connect Zoho Inventory, which handles your sales orders, you suddenly have two sales orders, objects, or modules in your system. One is from the CRM, and the other is from Zoho Finance. This is another strike against the engineers who designed this platform. Theoretically, they should have engineered a single module that is simply shared between two systems. But no, the CRM simply gets another one. But from the perspective of expanding functionality and quickly digitizing your business, Zoho offers just about everything you could possibly think of. If a business function comes to mind, Zoho has a corresponding dedicated product. And while I'll be frank, it's often poorly engineered and designed, it does the job. So I won't list individual features. I'll just say this. Simply look at the Zoho One subscription to see the range of products included. If you need project management, you can link projects to client records and see all projects by account. If you need a service desk for customer support or return processing in your e-commerce, you set up the service desk and all those returns and support tickets show up in Zoho CRM. In terms of pure functionality, Zoho is an exceptional product, truly. But I have professional deformation, as I already said, and my major complaints are always directed at the quality of those products. We will in fact talk more about quality later, which is a great time to talk about mobile experience. Now, what could I say about the mobile app? It's present, and surprisingly, I have to point out a positive here. I like Zoho CRM mobile app more than I like Salesforce mobile app. First, it's quite fast. When you switch between tabs, it loads the data quickly, it runs smoothly, and it provides access to all the modules present in the desktop app. The downside, as I've mentioned before, is that it's still a modular CRM. The mobile application is not truly adapted for mobile work scenarios. Yes, it has some excellent features such as voice notes, the ability to add photos, and attaching files from the system. On a side note, my company uses Synology, our own private cloud storage for video production, and I cannot add a file from Synology to the app. However, it does support all the standard integrations like Google Drive on Android and the native files on iPhone. If you compare mobile app to Pod Drive, the Pod Drive app is less functional but is much better adapted for field work. It feels designed for a scenario where I'm out on a meeting and need quick, handy tools to record an interaction. It has a more convenient pipeline view and generally feels a bit better suited to the on-the-go experience. Now, another good thing I noticed in the Zoho app is the built-in email client. You can send emails directly, and it includes read receipts, which often is crucial. For example, I personally use this all the time, especially when sending commercial proposals. If I see the client hasn't read an email, I know it might have landed in spam or been missed. I can then follow up via WhatsApp or direct call saying, hey, I think you might have missed my email. But ultimately, there isn't much more to say about the mobile app. The one feature that I like, however, that Salesforce doesn't have is call logging. It tracks and pulls the record of a call you made from your phone book into the mobile application. It works a bit better on Android and slightly smoothly on iPhone, but the basic functionality is there. Which brings me to a very important part of this video, reporting and analytics. When you open Zoho CRM, you'll find reporting split across two tabs, reports and analytics. Now, analytics is where your dashboards live, and reports are essentially simple data exports from the database. This gives us two sides of the same coin. Zoho's reports work well as long as you're looking at simple data, like a list of customers, deals, or invoices. The problem starts when you need to connect several layers of information. For example, imagine a customer or account has several contacts. One of those contacts reports a support issue, and that issue is linked to a specific product the customer bought. That kind of multi-step relationship is common in manufacturing and distribution, but Zoho's reporting can handle it cleanly. The moment you try to pull insight that span across those multiple connected layers, you hit limitation of reporting. From what I've seen so far, Zoho's report hit a wall once you go beyond 3 connected layers of data. For example, say you have a deal linked to a quote, and that quote lists products, and those products belong to a price book. If you try to pull all that into one report, Zoho will just not allow you to do this. Systems like Salesforce can go up to 8 or 9 levels deep without issue. This kind of limitation makes it hard to see the full picture of how your data connects. The next issue is even more basic. Let's say you want a list of contacts, but next to each contact, you also want to see their company's annual revenue. Zoho reports won't like you to combine that information in a single view. It keeps data locked inside each module, so to build a simple overview, you end up juggling multiple report types and workarounds. In most modern CRMs, this has been solved for years. Managers expect to sort contacts by company size or revenue or similar scenarios. In Zoho, that's a manual process. Now, one might say, someone experienced with CRMs, that Zoho Analytics solves this. Zoho Analytics is their version of Power BI or Looker from Google, a separate tool designed for advanced reporting. But to use it properly, you need to understand database queries. Even simple reports often require writing MySQL commands. Without that knowledge, most users won't get far. And compared to Power BI, Zoho Analytics is missing many features professionals rely on. In short, Zoho's reporting isn't up to the level of the company claims. It looks and sounds like an enterprise solution, but the reporting system behaves like an entry-level tool. You can export basic data, and that's useful, but beyond that, it quickly becomes frustrating, which brings me to the next chapter of my video, product support. And let's start with user documentation. And here, everything is quite simple. It doesn't exist. I tried to find it. There are a few scattered articles and some non-company generated guides, but there is no fundamental comprehensive learning system. The only official thing I could find were some courses you can sign up for, and judging by descriptions, the content seems heavily oriented towards administrators and partners. This leads into the technical documentation, and it exists. It's reasonably developed, although I don't love the format they use to store it. Now, we have to talk about two distinct documentation lines. First is the admin documentation, the declarative settings documentation. Now, declarative simply means any setting that doesn't involve writing a code. So anything you as an administrator or somebody who is configuring the system is going to be using without writing a single line of code. The documentation here is organized into a folder-based knowledge base. Navigation isn't great, and the articles are often short and poorly written, but they globally describe all or most of the system's functions. I frequently find myself missing the business context, examples of why a function is used, how it is used, and what are, more detailed business use cases. Again, I have to compare this to Salesforce, which sets an industry standard, providing details and endless resources. And I compare it to Salesforce only because Zoho essentially positions itself as a competitor, often explicitly stating they are better than Salesforce. If you claim that, then you must provide similar quality. But no, the admin documentation feels like it's there to check a box, like so much else in Zoho, unfortunately. Now, the second part is the developer documentation. This is slightly better, but it's far from great. It's quite brief. It doesn't thoroughly document the data model. There is a section, but it is very superficial and doesn't explain all the limitations. And here's the most interesting part. I know from practice that the system's behavior via API often differs from what is written in the documentation. This leads me to a strong conclusion based on my experience. The documentation is not properly integrated into the development process. Developers push the code and often don't inform the documentation team about what they've done. This is, by the way, evident from the volume of content. It's quite scarce for a system of this size, with this many users and this many use cases. Even when you open the section on functions, everything is written superficially, how to set something up, how to connect command lines, and so on. It's all very shallow. Essentially, you are taught to go and figure it out all by yourself by trial and error. There are no answers for deep questions or exceptional use cases. When you encounter a real problem, you're left to the community forum or self-discovery. The reality is you'll usually have to figure out yourself because the culture around Zoho CRM is not the one that encourages knowledge sharing. In Salesforce world, every self-respecting developer who discovers something rushes to write an article because it adds to their reputation and increases their hiring prospects. In the Zoho ecosystem, the policy seems to be the opposite. Keep all your knowledge to yourself so the clients pay you. Because Zoho's clients are typically less willing to pay premium rates due to the product's low cost. This means system integrators hoard specialized knowledge within their small consulting firms rather than sharing it with the world. Which brings me to community. Formally, a community exists and many topics are covered, but the activity is noticeably lower than on platforms like Salesforce. Zoho is very reluctant to answer questions, and when they do, the responses are usually short and dismissive. Often I see responses that link back to the documentation even when the user explicitly stated the documentation didn't help. Rarely do you see multiple developers engaging in a productive debate or independent member providing a super detailed and helpful answer. Usually, it's a formal, often insufficient response from a company representative. I would rate the community as having a limited usefulness. I would honestly not rely on it if you are serious about development. You will have to do a lot of troubleshooting and finding workarounds by your own. Finally, client support. And oh boy, I do have a story here. Client support works much like what I've described in my review of Begin CRM. It's a Zoho subsidiary. I do have a review on my channel. Any problem not covered in documentation or on the forums will receive the following response. Thank you, let's confirm your problem, and then they will provide a near copy-paste of what you already told them in the message. You will confirm it, and they say, great, we will connect you with a specialist. Sometime later, an update comes in, and I had the distinct impression during our project that the new person hadn't even read the previous correspondence. They just drop in a quick, generic answer to maintain the appearance of activity on the ticket. You sit there thinking, I just sent logs and detailed code. Can you connect me with somebody who simply reads and forwards it to the right person? I have never once been successfully helped in solving a complex problem. I either get a link to the forum post I've already found or answer like, we work this way. This is a known limitation. Thank you for reporting this to us. Please rate our service out of 5. It's completely useless for complex issues. They certainly answer simple questions, but I can answer those myself with documentation and experience. I need support when the self-service tools fail. And with Zoho, that is a huge problem. While they undoubtedly have competent people, it is not the rule. It's the exception. Their goal is just to close the ticket as quickly as possible, no matter what. And with the introduction of AI, I fear it will only get worse. My review of their support quality is strongly negative. They are very sincere and very active in pretending that they care, and I have to give them credit for that. Which brings me to the next point of this video. Typically, in my reviews, I dedicate 3 distinct subsections: out-of-the-box functionality, data model, and scalability and security and compliance. But since this review is already lengthy and I don't have much to say on these 3 points, I've decided to merge them into one discussion. So let's start with out-of-the-box integrations, meaning integration with third-party tools. This is one of the few genuine positives for Zoho. The product has been around for long enough. The selection is decent, and platforms like Make.com, you'll find solid coverage for most standard use cases. That said, Zoho's terminology immediately gets in the way. For example, in Make.com, you might see an action labeled Watch Object. But in Zoho CRM, there is no such thing as an object. Zoho calls them modules. The problem isn't the naming itself. It's the inconsistency. Third-party platforms follow standard CRM terminology, while Zoho users use its own internal vocabulary, forcing you to constantly translate between systems. Even within Make.com, Zoho's structure feels disjoint. Actions like create user, delete user, and get user are treated as separate items instead of being grouped logically under a single user object. I know it's a small thing, but those small things add up. This pattern, functional but poorly structured, runs through the entire Zoho ecosystem. This leads me directly to data model architecture and scalability. Purely on paper, the data model is serious enough. Theoretically, you can support complex use cases by creating custom objects or modules, as they prefer to call them. In practice, however, I've repeatedly found that the number of relationships is limited, the field types are odd, and supporting data validation is incredibly difficult. I honestly don't know of a single enterprise scale use case where the system could be reliably and properly scaled. I could be wrong, of course, and you can correct me in the comments below. Regarding security and compliance, questions certainly arise here too. When I started Googling for incidents, I found an interesting case involving a serious security vulnerability in Manage Engine, a product owned by Zoho. There was a significant bug and subsequent vulnerability found in that product, and users were attacked. More broadly, there is a lot of discussion in the community about the feeling that not every Zoho is covered by encryption. Zoho claims they use encryption everywhere, but many people speculate based on circumstantial evidence that not all fields are actually encrypted. So caution is warranted. While on paper they are supposedly compliant and you probably won't have any issues with regulators, you need to be very, very careful, especially when using third-party services that connect to Zoho as you're granting them access to your data. You have to be meticulous and extremely cautious, particularly since a single API key theoretically grants access to the entire database. While it might be possible to create a user with super limited permissions to handle API calls, remember that this will cost you another license fee. So that is the nuance you face, which brings me to the price and cost of ownership of Zoho CRM. Now, Zoho operates with two or really three different billing models. The first model is when you buy only the standalone Zoho CRM. It has several tiers: standard, professional, enterprise, and ultimate. These are difficult to compare without deep testing because I have very little trust in Zoho's documentation accuracy. I'm 100% sure something is not fully described. But based on circumstantial evidence, the closest plan that will allow you to maintain a serious level of CRM functionality is likely the enterprise plan. This is because it includes custom functions, client portals, and everything required for modern business processes. Plus, and this is critical, a sandbox environment. I would strongly advise against operating without a sandbox. A sandbox allows you to create a copy of your CRM with or without data, where you can test configurations before pushing changes to the live system. I won't get into the quality of their sandbox or their deployment process right now, but that functionality is key. The specific prices may change, but the structure of these tiers has been quite stable for some time. However, Zoho has far more interesting model. The Zoho One subscription, which is split into two types. The first is the all-employee pricing. This is a crucial distinction. You must purchase a license for every single person on your payroll, regardless of whether they actually use a Zoho CRM. Whether they are warehouse workers, drivers, or an office employees, everyone must be licensed. This currently costs around 37 euros per user per month. Again, prices fluctuate. I remember that it was like 30 euros or something, but the principle remains the same. The second type is the flexible user pricing, where you only pay for the users who actively access the system. The per user price, however, is nearly 3 times higher than the all-employee rate. Now, frankly, if you accept the risks associated with the Zoho, the limitations, the inconveniences, and the architectural difficulties, and you decide to move forward, I strongly recommend looking at the Zoho One. It massively expands your capabilities. With a flexible user pricing, you get the enterprise level of Zoho CRM plus dozens of other valuable apps. Things like invoicing tool, for example, which is perfectly fine, and their equivalent of DocuSign for document signing. I strongly advise going with Zoho One. Now, concerning the total cost of ownership, this will heavily depend on your organizational setup and your reliance on implementation partners. And to be honest, if you plan to build any sort of digital infrastructure on Zoho, you absolutely need an administrator on your team. Like any system with an enterprise level of complexity, you need someone who understands user creation, permission management, security auditing, and logs. This doesn't have to be a full-time employee, but a shared administrative role is essential. The good news are that the total cost of ownership is significantly lower than enterprise solutions like Salesforce or SAP, for example. This is largely because the hourly rate for developers and administrators in the Zoho ecosystem is substantially lower. I can't vouch for the quality of those partners, but the cost is noticeably lower, maybe 60, 70, or even 80% cheaper than the equivalent cost of ownership for Salesforce. This total cost of ownership advantage is real, provided you're willing to accept the significant trade-offs and structural limitations that come with Zoho. Which brings me to the final part of my video, my personal take. And it's time to answer the question, would I want to use Zoho? My answer is very simple. No, absolutely not. I wouldn't want to use Zoho CRM for my own company. But that doesn't mean your opinion can differ. And there are several reasons you might want to use Zoho CRM. And the main reason is the Zoho ecosystem. Zoho has many perfectly acceptable products. Zoho Finance is actually good. The invoicing is perfectly fine. They offer self-service portals like Zoho Commerce where B2B clients can place orders. I actually know a case where an entire business is built on Zoho Commerce. So while this whole review may sound like if I intensely hate Zoho, and I do to some extent, it doesn't mean the product is entirely unusable. You can use it. My problem is that I'm comparing Zoho to enterprise-class corporate solutions because that is the status they are constantly implicitly trying to claim, that they're better than the competition. If you look at the site for Begin CRM, a related product, they openly trash talk other systems. Seriously, just for fun, go look at their Begin CRM site and read their comparisons. They openly hate on the competition. And conversely, there is a lot of enthusiastic content online where many people joyfully review Zoho as a wonderful product. But I have to look at this product from my perspective as a consultant, someone who recommends solutions to clients. Factoring in company growth, business digitalization, and the ability to automate complex processes. Yes, the Zoho ecosystem is very, very good, but I was specifically reviewing the CRM component, how easy it is to build a digital experience within Zoho CRM, and whether it's suitable for anything even moderately serious, whatever that means. So let me know in the comments what you think. What Zoho products do you use, if any? What do you compare Zoho to, and what is your own conclusion? What do you think this product was actually built for, and who can successfully use it? Don't forget to check the link in the description if you're looking to implement CRM. Just answer a few simple questions and we'll make a recommendation which system suits you best. On that note, make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit like this video to help spread the word, and see you next time. Peace.